HOA bully cops brought a fake warrant, but I am former Delta Force. I remember the exact moment. My life took a sudden, menacing turn. The afternoon sun was glaring down on my porch, shadows stretching across the perfectly trimmed lawns in my supposedly tranquil neighborhood. That's when I heard the forceful knock, louder than any friendly neighbor would make. Opening the door, I saw a group of uniformed men brandishing a document they claimed was a warrant. My instincts, sharpened by years of military service, screamed that something wasn't right. This wasn't a standard neighborhood dispute. The look in their eyes told me they were hunting for more than petty infractions. And in that instant, I knew my quiet retirement was over. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. I grew up in a small but vibrant city near the coast, a place where people left their doors unlocked, and the biggest scandal was inevitably tied to who won the annual chili cook-off. My parents were hardworking folks, mom as a teacher, dad a carpenter. They taught me the value of integrity. If I made a mistake, I should own it. If I had a chance to help someone, I should do it without reservation. That guiding principle colored my entire life, especially when I joined the U.S. Army right after high school. It was both a leap into the unknown and a natural extension of my desire to serve. The Army shaped me into someone very different from the shy teenager who left home. I discovered I had an affinity for strategy, for analyzing how to navigate complex, dangerous situations. That, coupled with my refusal to back down, eventually landed me in Delta Force. I was neither the biggest nor the brawniest recruit, but I was resilient. I had a laser focus on the mission and an innate ability to adapt to chaos. Over the years, I operated in some of the world's most perilous regions. I parachuted into volatile zones under cover of night, negotiated labyrinthine city streets patrolled by hostile forces, and bore witness to the profound depths of both human cruelty and heroism. My team became my second family. We bonded through shared danger and the unwavering trust that can only come from putting your life in another's hands. Yet, like many in high-intensity roles, I reached a point where I yearned for peace. The endless loop of adrenaline, tragedy, and moral complexity took its toll. So, I returned to civilian life, believing I could settle into a quieter existence. The neighborhood I chose seemed like the epitome of calm. Wide sidewalks, a lovely little park at its center, and a lake that sparkled under the afternoon sun. The houses had a uniform prettiness: blue shutters, flower-lined paths, and neatly trimmed hedges. The residents waved politely. I thought I'd found my refuge, a place to garden, to host casual get-togethers, to finally take a breath after years of near-constant tension. There was one caveat: the neighborhood came with a homeowners association and HOA that had, at first glance, a simple set of rules. Keep your yard tidy, limit noise after certain hours, pay monthly dues for shared amenities. In my optimism, I saw no problem with that. But soon I realized the HOA was more than just guidelines. It felt like a regiment unto itself. When I attended my first community meeting, I noticed there was a hierarchy. The HOA president, Garrett, acted like a small-town monarch. He seemed to relish his authority, doling out citations with a smug smile as if he were conferring a personal favor. Some neighbors flinched around him, as though fearful of incurring his wrath. I tried to stay neutral, focusing on renovating my backyard and planting a modest vegetable patch. Then came the first citation, a notice on my mailbox about the color of my garden hose. It was forest green, apparently not among the approved palette. I laughed it off at first, but a creeping sense of unease whispered that this was more than petty nitpicking. The next clash came a few weeks later. A neighbor, a gentle retiree named Sandra, asked if I could help her fix a loose shutter. I had a toolbox, and it was a quick job. We chatted about flowers as I reattached the shutter. Then the HOA letter arrived the next day. It cited some obscure regulation about unqualified maintenance or non-HOA sanctioned repairs. They fined Sandra, not me. Incensed, I paid her fine, feeling guilty she'd been penalized for my help. That's when a pattern began to emerge. The HOA punished any perceived disruption of their control, no matter how well-intentioned. And so I learned to keep a low profile up to a point. One evening, I'd been out grocery shopping, and on my return, I found an HOA inspector rummaging through my trash can, presumably looking for evidence of some violation. Anger surged, and I confronted him. He insisted it was within his rights and threatened to report me for harassment. My old military instincts warned me to de-escalate, but that flicker of fury at being monitored so blatantly never fully left me. Meanwhile, quiet discussions in the neighborhood suggested Garrett had formed his own enforcement brigade. Off-duty cops, mostly from a nearby precinct, were paid extra by the HOA to patrol the area. Their presence was unnerving unmarked cars idling near corners, certain neighbors feeling singled out for trivial issues like an incorrectly placed recycling bin. They wore official police uniforms, yet they invoked the HOA's authority more than the city's. The lines between legitimate law enforcement and private security blurred, creating a perfect recipe for intimidation. I tried not to attract attention, but bullies often sense who might resist them. My only indulgence was a small American flag I'd hung near my front window. It was my quiet way of honoring those I'd served with. Strange notes started appearing in my mailbox. "We respect your service, but we have rules." The phrasing was always polite, the threat implicit. Then came the dreaded visit from Garrett himself, accompanied by two uniformed men. He was cordial at first, referencing the flag and claiming it was too large and hung at an angle that marred the neighborhood aesthetic. Inwardly, I seethed. He was insulting a symbol that embodied my sacrifices. When I calmly told him I saw no official rule about the size or angle of flags, he responded with a sly smile that he could make a new rule if he deemed it necessary. One of the men behind him rested his hand on his holster in a show of intimidation. The message was clear: comply or face an ever-evolving set of rules. My experiences overseas had taught me to pick battles carefully. This was my home, though. I was tired of constantly moving, of never feeling truly settled. And I recognized that Garrett's brand of authoritarianism was a slow poison. If I allowed him to chip away at my rights, he'd keep going until there was nothing left. I had no intention of backing down. The tension brewed until one muggy summer evening when the knock on my door changed everything. I'd been reading in my living room, lulled by the hum of the air conditioner, when a heavy fist rattled my door. Peering through the peephole, I saw 4 uniformed men, 2 from the local force and 2 in generic security uniforms. Garrett was absent, but his presence was felt in the smug tilt of their posture. One of them held up a piece of paper against the glass, yelling they had a warrant to search my property. The words "illegal modifications" bellowed from the other side of the door. A cold prickle of alarm coursed through me. Their so-called warrant looked off. Warrants, real warrants, had a specific tone, clear charges, correct addresses, date stamps. My specialized training in Delta Force sometimes involved close collaboration with various law enforcement agencies, so I'd seen legitimate warrants. The one in their hands could fool an untrained eye, but to me, it was a sloppy forgery. Keeping my voice steady, I asked them to slip it through the mail slot. They refused and demanded immediate entry. My heart thudded hard in my chest, a mix of outrage and a surge of adrenaline. Then came the threats. One officer sneered, "Don't make us use force." Another hammered the door again. My mind raced. I had firearms at home legally owned, but drawing them would escalate the situation to a frightening level. I stood my ground verbally, stating they had no legitimate authority. Finally, they left, but not without hurling ugly taunts about me being a liability to the neighborhood. I realized with a certainty that made my hands shake that they were trying to provoke me. If they could claim I'd resisted arrest or threatened them, they could twist the narrative and have me removed. This was bigger than just a fake warrant. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign to intimidate me into either submission or departure. A few nights later, in a clandestine conversation with a neighbor's daughter who worked in the local courthouse, I confirmed my suspicions. No legal warrant had been issued in my name, and there were no open investigations regarding my property. That piece of paper they'd waved around was indeed a fabrication. The neighbor's daughter, Hannah, was livid at the discovery. She mentioned that certain local officers had a reputation for bending rules for money or influence. The idea that the HOA could have such sway wasn't surprising to her, but it sickened us both. Shaken yet resolute, I told Hannah the first plan to fight back. She agreed to discreetly gather whatever documentation she could, public records, official communications, so we'd have proof of the HOA's manipulations. But even as we worked in secrecy, I worried about who might be watching. The entire neighborhood was under a watchful gaze. I confided in an old Army friend named Regan, who lived in the next county. Regan had served as an MP military police before transitioning to private investigative work. She was the kind of person who could sniff out a lie the way bloodhounds catch a scent. Upon hearing my predicament, Regan insisted on helping. She told me there were legal avenues, civil complaints, restraining orders, official inquiries, but that I needed indisputable evidence. Regan also had an idea: document everything, she said. Use cameras, record them if they show up again. Show the real police what's happening. It seemed straightforward, but I knew it wasn't without risk. If these off-duty cops discovered they were being filmed, it could fuel their aggression. Still, I refused to live in fear. With Regan's assistance, I set up a few discreet security cameras around my house, hidden behind carefully placed decorations and plant pots. Even as I made these plans, the harassment continued. I found vandalism on my car, a deep scratch keyed into the paint. My front porch light was shattered one morning. Another time, I stepped out to get the mail and discovered raw eggs splattered across my garage door. The letters from the HOA escalated, each one more threatening, each one piling on fines and citations. I began to doubt whether any sense of normalcy could exist here. The only thing that kept me going was my conviction that running away or surrendering would let them win. A few weeks passed, and I found a note pinned to my wooden fence: "We're watching you." It had no signature, just those 3 chilling words. That same evening, I saw a shadowy figure standing under the street lamp near my house. He wore a dark ball cap, and though it was too far to see his expression, his stance felt menacing. I was about to call out when he slipped into the darkness. My old Delta Force instincts kicked in. I circled my house from the inside, checking the locks, ensuring that the cameras were running. I'd been in life and death situations before, but there was something deeply unsettling about this violation occurring in what was supposed to be my safe haven. 2 days later, the cameras finally caught something significant. At around 1 a.m., 3 figures sneaked into my backyard. One fiddled with the lock on my back door. Another tested the windows. All were wearing black, faces partially covered. Their stealth suggested training, not your run-of-the-mill teenagers out for mischief. My heart pounded as I watched the footage from my secure feed. They left hastily when my neighbor's dog barked, but the message was clear. They were coming for me, or at least preparing for it. With Regan's help, I saved the footage onto multiple devices and stored backups in secure locations. I also forwarded some of the evidence to Hannah. My next move was to consult a lawyer named Dahlia, who specialized in civil rights cases and had a reputation for exposing corruption in small-town law enforcement. Upon viewing the videos, Dahlia's face hardened with resolve. "We have grounds for a civil suit, possibly a criminal complaint," she said, "but we need more conclusive ties to the HOA." We need to draw a direct line between their leadership, Garrett, specifically, and these off-duty cops. The next time I saw Garrett was at a neighborhood BBQ, a monthly event designed to foster community. He greeted everyone with oily charm, all smiles and pleasantries. Yet whenever our eyes met, his polite mask slipped for a fraction of a second. Hatred smoldered there, an undercurrent that promised he would rid himself of me sooner or later. It took all my discipline not to confront him in front of the entire crowd. Dahlia had advised me to maintain appearances until we had the means to strike decisively. Still, the tension was unbearable. I felt I was walking on eggshells every moment. My daily routine was overshadowed by the knowledge that I was being watched. Every time I pulled into my driveway, I glanced around to see if an unmarked car was waiting. Every morning, I scanned my yard for signs of tampering. The relentless stress became a new kind of warfare, psychological, insidious. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, replaying the day's events, wondering if the next knock on my door would be the one that changed my life forever. Eventually, Dahlia advised me to approach the county sheriff's department, bypassing the local precinct, which might be compromised. She arranged a meeting with the deputy named Alvarez, someone she trusted. At first, Alvarez seemed skeptical. HOA corruption, forged warrants, off-duty officers moonlighting as bullies. But once I showed him some footage, including the break-in attempts, he sobered. "This is serious," he admitted, scribbling notes. "We'll need to move carefully. If local officers are involved, we don't know who might be on the take." Alvarez assured me he'd initiate a quiet investigation, though the wheels of justice often turn slowly, especially when corruption may run deep. In the meantime, I was told to stay vigilant. There was talk of requesting official protective surveillance, but Alvarez wasn't sure if the county had the resources, and he worried about tipping off local law enforcement who might be in Garrett's pocket. On a particularly hot August night, everything came to a head. I was up late reviewing emails and the latest HOA letter, which threatened a lien on my house if I didn't remove the flag, fix imaginary fence problems, and pay a slew of fines for violations that barely made sense. Tired and exasperated, I nearly missed the faint beeping from one of my security cameras. I stared at the live feed on my laptop. Several forms moved stealthily through the side gate. They were better equipped, this time flashlights, crowbars, maybe guns. My heart thundered. It felt like being back on a mission, except this was my property, my sanctuary. I grabbed my phone and called Alvarez's direct number, leaving him a message that an intrusion was in progress. My gut told me the intruders wouldn't wait around for backup to arrive. This was an orchestrated move. In Delta Force, we had a mantra: adapt, act, overcome. My living room lights were off, giving me an advantage. I slipped into a vantage point near the hallway, staying low. The back door handle jiggled. A muffled voice muttered, "It's locked. Look for another way." My windows had extra locks, and I'd braced the doors after the last attempt, so they'd have to work to force entry. Eventually, they shattered the glass on a side window near my kitchen, clearing enough space to reach in and unlock it. I watched in silent fury as one by one, 3 men in dark clothing climbed through. One whispered commands. Another responded with a curt nod. They moved in practiced formation. This was no casual burglary. My cameras recorded every second. Quiet as a shadow, I inched behind the kitchen counter. One intruder flicked on a flashlight, scanning the area. "Find the hard drives," he hissed. "Destroy them and anything else that looks like evidence." My pulse pounded, but I swallowed my fear. Instead, I readied myself for confrontation. A small legal pistol was holstered at my hip. I prayed I wouldn't need to fire it, but I was prepared if it came to that. It was as though the ghosts of my Delta Force missions found new life inside me. My breath slowed, my mind cleared. I thought about the best way to neutralize the threat without deadly force, if possible. The first man separated from the group, stepping cautiously down the hallway. The other two rummaged through drawers, seeking electronics. I crept forward, took advantage of the rummaging man's distraction, and delivered a swift blow to the side of his head with a sturdy flashlight of my own. He collapsed with a groan, dropping what looked like a crowbar. The second rummager spun, brandishing a sidearm. I ducked behind the counter before he fired. The bullet lodged in my cabinet, splintering wood. My heart hammered as adrenaline surged. I popped up just enough to knock him off balance with a well-aimed toss of a cast-iron skillet, unorthodox, but effective. He stumbled, and I lunged forward, hooking a leg around his knees. We both hit the floor. He grappled for his gun, but I pinned his arm and seized it with a practiced twist, feeling a jolt of recognition in my muscles from the old training days. With a swift motion, I released the magazine and tossed the gun aside. Before I could fully secure him, footsteps thundered from the hallway. The third intruder, presumably the one who'd gone scouting, returned. He aimed a weapon at me. I froze, pressed to the floor with the second assailant's arm still in my grasp. For an instant, I thought it was over a single pull of that trigger, and my stand would end violently. Then, unexpectedly, the second intruder, half-dazed, rolled me, trying to pin me himself. The third hesitated, likely not wanting to shoot his accomplice by accident. I used that hesitation. Twisting free, I scrambled behind the kitchen island. Their curses filled the air. I heard them whisper frantic plans, something about needing to finish the job. That phrase lit a fire in me. They were here to do more than just destroy evidence. They might be here to ensure I couldn't talk. Another gunshot rang out, this one chipping tile near my foot. I returned fire, aiming low, hoping to disable without killing. The bullet grazed one intruder's leg. He howled in pain, dropping his weapon. Time stretched in that surreal way it does during life-threatening situations. Each second waited with possibility. Then, red and blue lights flickered in my front windows, and the wail of sirens cut through the tension. The intruders panicked. One cursed loudly, "We gotta go!" But they were cornered, one down, another wounded, the third uncertain. Realizing they had no quick exit, they tried to retreat the way they came. Sheriff's deputies burst in from the front door, guns drawn, ordering everyone down. Alvarez was among them, face set in grim focus. The intruders had no choice but to surrender, their bravado crumbling under the bright beams of flashlights. I lowered my weapon, hands up, breath ragged with relief. My entire body shook with the aftershock of adrenaline. In the aftermath, the deputies secured the three men. Handcuffs clicked, questions flew, and the house buzzed with urgent energy. One deputy tended to the wounded intruder, who was bleeding from the leg. Another stashed the confiscated firearms into evidence bags. Alvarez led me outside, concerned for my well-being. He asked if I was hurt. I shook my head, though I trembled from the adrenaline wearing off. More squad cars arrived, painting the night in swirling lights. Neighbors peered from windows, some in pajamas. Garrett was nowhere to be seen, but as the men were taken into custody, I recognized one of them as a local policeman I'd seen patrolling our community. My stomach lurched. This was proof of deeper corruption. Alvarez immediately separated the legitimate officers from the men who merely wore uniforms. An intense flurry of questions followed, and eventually the intruders started cracking under the pressure. They hinted that Garrett had hired them, that they were promised a substantial sum. Their mission, destroy my evidence and, if necessary, silence me. The net began to close around Garrett. The following week was a whirlwind of statements, official reports, and negotiations with the district attorney. Dahlia worked tirelessly, providing the stockpile of evidence I'd collected: videos, suspicious HOA notices, the forged warrant fiasco. Hannah came forward with additional records that showed a suspicious flow of HOA funds. Regan contributed background checks linking these shady officers to a local network of enforcement for hire. It all coalesced into a formidable case. Finally, the authorities arrested Garrett on charges ranging from conspiracy to commit burglary and forgery. to more serious infractions like bribery and intimidation of a witness. The same night he was led away in handcuffs. A hushed, collective sigh spread through the neighborhood. People stepped onto their porches, exchanging relieved glances. The specter that had ruled over them through fear was finally gone. In the aftermath, I struggled with a swirl of emotions. Vindication at seeing Garrett brought to justice. Fury at how close I'd come to real harm in my own home. Sadness that such a tranquil-looking place could harbor so much darkness. Yet, I also felt a fierce pride in having stood my ground. The HOA board dissolved amid scandal and legal injunctions. An interim committee of residents formed, determined to rewrite the guidelines with fairness and transparency. Some neighbors apologized for standing idly by or for turning a blind eye. Others confided that they, too, had been threatened or fined into silence. Hearing their stories, I realized how profoundly bullies can crush the spirit of a community until someone pushes back. A few months later, as I sipped iced tea on my newly rebuilt back porch, the intruders had left a broken window and damaged siding in their wake. I felt a sense of liberation. The nightmares from my Delta Force days had lessened, replaced by a cautious but hopeful sense of normalcy. I'd reconnected with parts of myself. I'd tucked away my love for gardening, for reading long novels, for listening to the cicadas sing at dusk. In the midst of that restoration, I found unexpected support. Alvarez, the deputy who had first taken me seriously, became a frequent visitor. At first, we talked mostly about the legal process. Then our conversations turned more personal, shared stories of childhood, of adversity, and of choosing professions that demanded sacrifice. Over time, it blossomed into something deeper. We discovered a mutual appreciation for one another's resilience and sense of justice. One evening, Alvarez and I walked by the lake in the center of the community, now shimmering under a near full moon. We passed other neighbors strolling peacefully, and I marveled at the transformation. No more unmarked cars lurking, no more tense sideways glances. The air held a new warmth, a sense of renewed trust. As we paused on a bench, Alvarez took my hand. "I admire your courage," he said softly. "You stood alone when no one else would, and you didn't give up." A wave of gratitude and emotion surged through me. He was right. I'd faced horrifying situations overseas, yet this personal battle on my doorstep had tested me in different, more intimate ways. I was scared, I admitted. Not of the fight itself, but that no one would believe me. He squeezed my hand in response. "I believe you," he whispered. The gentle sincerity in his eyes melted away the last vestiges of my guarded defenses. Days passed, and with each dawn, the tension that had once gripped the neighborhood receded further. The new HOA committee abolished numerous petty regulations and replaced them with guidelines that truly enhanced the community volunteer programs, block parties, and open forums where every resident had a voice. Sandra, my neighbor who once got fined for letting me fix her shutter, took a leadership role, ensuring the association wouldn't lapse into old patterns. Eventually, Garrett and his accomplices faced trial. Some of the off-duty cops struck plea deals, unveiling the depth of his corruption. The court uncovered bribes, money laundering, and an entire scheme of scaring or forcing unwanted homeowners out to shape the neighborhood in Garrett's twisted image. He was convicted and sentenced to prison, his once smug face caught in an expression of utter defeat. I attended the sentencing, feeling no remorse for him, only relief. Standing outside the courthouse afterwards, a few neighbors patted my shoulder and thanked me. I told them I was just one person, and that many had contributed to taking Garrett down. But deep inside, I finally felt the closure that had eluded me. This was a mission completed. I could breathe freely again. I threw myself into home projects, repainting my walls in bright, uplifting colors, replacing battered furniture with pieces that made the space feel wholly mine. I hung my flag once more, higher this time, a statement of the freedom I refuse to relinquish. Alvarez helped me build a new fence, and we spent weekends exploring local shops and museums. A cautious, blossoming happiness found its way into my life, one not shadowed by fear or the demands of a controlling regime. Occasionally, I still had flashbacks, random surges of panic when I heard heavy knocks at the door. But I was learning to cope, to anchor myself in the present. I started volunteering at a nearby veteran center, sharing my experiences with younger vets and letting them know they weren't alone. I realized that my story, once a source of secret shame and anxiety, could inspire others to face their own battles. Word of the HOA scandal spread far beyond our town. It became a cautionary tale, a testament to how power can corrupt local governance when left unchecked. Journalists wrote articles shining light on unscrupulous HOAs and forging calls for stronger regulatory oversight. The entire fiasco, while painful, sparked conversations in city halls and legislative offices about the need to protect homeowners from overreaching boards and illicit private policing. Sometimes I replay the memory of that final confrontation in my mind, the intruders creeping in, the confrontation in the kitchen, the dizzying fear, and the final flash of relief when the deputies arrived. It's not that I enjoy remembering the danger, I certainly don't, but it reminds me that I can stand up for what's right, even when every muscle in my body screams to run or hide. It reminds me that while the battlefield might change from a foreign war zone to our own doorstep, the principles of courage, integrity, and perseverance remain the same. As for the neighborhood, it emerged from Garrett's shadow with renewed camaraderie. We host monthly potlucks now, not forced HOA gatherings, but real community events. Children play in the cul-de-sacs, and people stop to chat rather than cower behind closed doors. We formed neighborhood watch groups that report directly to the county sheriff's department, ensuring real accountability. It's amazing how adversity can unite people once they break through the barrier of fear. Looking back, I see parallels between my time in Delta Force and this strange suburban skirmish. In the Army, I learned discipline, strategy, and the importance of having each other's backs. In this quiet little neighborhood, I learned how critical it is to confront abuse of power before it festers into something monstrous. I never sought revenge in a traditional sense, but in the end, I did get it, in the form of justice served and a community freed from oppression. The biggest lesson was that you don't have to lose your humanity to fight. Compassion and understanding can coexist with unwavering resolve. My fight with the HOA bully cops wasn't just about protecting my rights, it was about standing up for everyone else who felt powerless. A few weeks after the trial, I held a small gathering at my place, a celebratory barbecue of my own choosing. I invited neighbors, Alvarez, Hannah, Regan, and Dahlia. We laughed, shared stories, and toasted marshmallows around a fire pit. The atmosphere was light, a testament to how far we'd come from the days of creeping shadows and threatening notes. By the evening's end, someone joked about how this was our new normal, and we all nodded, grateful that normal now meant freedom and fellowship rather than fear. My life had changed irrevocably. I'd gone from covert missions in foreign lands to a bizarre homefront battle that tested my moral and emotional thresholds. Yet I found myself stronger for it, stronger and unexpectedly happier. I had a deeper appreciation for what it means to own a piece of land, to plant roots, to let yourself become vulnerable in the pursuit of a real home. In quiet moments, I remember the final day in Delta Force when I packed my gear, uncertain if I'd ever again face a threat so personal. Little did I know that lurking behind the manicured lawns and pristine gates of suburbia was a formidable enemy: arrogance, greed, and raw intimidation. But I fought back, and I won. Or, more accurately, we won. This was a collective victory, a reminder that bullies can be toppled when good people unite. Now, with a genuine sense of belonging in this once oppressive neighborhood, I can finally savor simple pleasures: the warm sun on my face, the laughter of neighbors chatting over fences, the secure knowledge that my flag waves high not just for me, but for the ideals we all hold dear. Some nights, I linger on my porch swing, watching the stars blink to life, and wonder at how adversity shapes us. We might never be the same, but sometimes we become better. It took a twisted HOA, a handful of corrupt cops, a forged warrant, and a dash of Delta Force grit to bring me to a place of balance and love. It took fear to reveal courage and cruelty to reveal compassion, but in the end I am here truly at home. Thank you for experiencing this journey with me. I hope my story, the fear, the tenacity, and the eventual triumph has resonated with you on a deep level. Life can throw unexpected enemies our way, even behind the polished facade of suburban life. Yet, standing firm and seeking justice can transform a toxic environment into a supportive community. If this story made your heart pound, your mind race, or reminded you of the power of unity, please remember to like this video, share it with someone who could use a spark of courage, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring and suspenseful tales. Together, let's keep shining a light on hidden truths and celebrating stories of hard-won victory.